The conference hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, floating in the void between stars. 12 species had gathered here, representatives of the Galactic Assembly, to decide the fate of humanity. The air shimmered with translation fields as voices merged into a chorus of judgment. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone in the center chamber. Her dark suit looked plain against the exotic forms surrounding her. Some delegates wore environmental suits filled with methane. Others floated in gravity bubbles. A few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline shells. They were all older than humanity. They were all afraid. The humans have colonized 47 systems in just 2 centuries. The Kelthari representative hissed through his translator. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of disgust. No other species has expanded so aggressively. They are a plague. Elena kept her voice steady. We have only settled uninhabited worlds. We have respected every boundary, every treaty. What law have we broken? The Vryn delegate rippled its tentacles. You break the unspoken law. You multiply too fast. You adapt too quickly. You will consume the galaxy if left unchecked. That is not a crime, Elena said. That is life. The vote came swiftly. 11 species voted for containment. Only the Arathi abstained, their crystalline form pulsing with what might have been shame. The word containment was chosen carefully. It sounded clinical, almost kind. But Elena understood. Containment meant extinction. She was given 1 hour to leave the station before it would be sealed. As her shuttle pulled away, she transmitted the verdict back to Earth. By the time her message arrived, it would already be too late. The Kelthari had spent decades perfecting their bioengineering skills. They could reshape life at the molecular level, creating viruses that attacked specific genetic markers. The pathogen they designed for humanity was their masterwork. It spread through air, water, and touch. It had a 3-week incubation period, ensuring maximum distribution before symptoms appeared. It was coded to human DNA so precisely that even their pets would be unharmed. The virus entered Earth's atmosphere inside cargo containers marked as medical supplies. Similar containers reached Mars Colony, Europa Station, and every human settlement across the stars. The Kelthari had infiltrated human supply chains years ago, preparing for this moment. Dr. Sarah Chen was in her laboratory on Mars when the first cases appeared. The symptoms started with fever and confusion. Then came the bleeding. Within days, hospitals overflowed. Within weeks, mass graves were being dug by robots because there were not enough living humans to bury the dead. Sarah worked 20-hour days, searching for answers. She watched the virus through her microscopes, marveling at its terrible efficiency. It attacked human cells with precision, unraveling their DNA like thread from a sweater. Every treatment she tried failed. Every vaccine was useless. The virus adapted faster than she could work. Her husband called from their apartment. His voice was weak. Sarah, I love you. Whatever happens, remember that. I am coming home, she said, already running for the door. She found him on the floor, blood staining the carpet around him. She held him as he died, feeling his hand grow cold in hers. She did not cry. There was no time for tears. Around her, the colony was dying. The screams echoed through the corridors. On Earth, Commander Marcus Webb watched his bridge crew collapse one by one. The ISS Defiance was a warship, built to defend humanity against external threats, but no weapon could fight a virus. His tactical officer coughed blood onto her console. His engineer died at his post, hands still on the controls. Marcus sealed himself in the captain's quarters, waiting for death to find him too. It never came. The fever struck him on day 19. He lay in his bunk, body burning, certain he would die like the others. But on day 22, the fever broke. He stood on shaking legs and looked at himself in the mirror. He was thinner, paler, but alive. Across human space, 600 million people survived. They did not know why. The virus had struck them just as hard as everyone else, but their bodies had endured. They crawled from their sickbeds to find their worlds transformed into graveyards. 11.2 billion people had died. That was 94% of humanity. Cities stood empty. Farms lay untended. Ships drifted in orbit with dead crews. The silence was absolute. The Galactic Assembly celebrated. They had avoided open war. They had used a surgical solution. Human territory would be divided among the member species. The aggressive newcomers had been handled efficiently. Zekthar, the Kelthari bioengineer who had designed the virus, stood in his laboratory and stared at the data. He had done his job perfectly. The pathogen had worked exactly as intended. He should have felt proud. Instead, he felt hollow. He accessed the surveillance feeds from human worlds. The images showed streets filled with bodies, children lying beside their parents, entire families dead in their homes. He had killed them all with his creation. His colleagues congratulated him. His government awarded him honors. But at night, alone in his chambers, Zekthar began compiling records. He documented everything about the virus, about the decision to deploy it, about the genocide he had helped commit. He did not know why he was doing this. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was insurance. Perhaps some part of him knew the story was not over. On Mars, Sarah Chen finally allowed herself to cry. She sat in her laboratory, surrounded by the dead, and wept for the world that had been lost. When her tears were spent, she returned to her microscopes. Something about the virus bothered her. The survivors were not random. There had to be a pattern. She began collecting blood samples from every survivor she could find. Whatever had saved them might save the future, if humanity had any future left. 6 months after the plague, Sarah Chen woke from another nightmare. She sat up in her bunk, covered in sweat, her heart racing. The dreams had been getting worse. In them, she felt her body changing from the inside, cells splitting and reforming in patterns that should not exist. She told herself it was just stress. She was wrong. The first sign appeared during breakfast. She reached for her coffee and the cup shattered in her hand. The ceramic exploded like it was made of paper. She stared at her fingers, confused. She had barely touched it. Over the next week, 5 more cups broke the same way. She started wearing gloves. Other survivors reported similar problems. A farmer on Earth lifted his tractor to move it and accidentally threw it 50 meters. A technician on Europa Station touched a broken computer and watched it suddenly power on. A child in the Pacific settlement looked at her mother and said, "I can hear what you are thinking." Sarah realized the truth with growing horror. The virus was not done with them. It was still inside them, still working, still changing them. She ran every test she could imagine. The results were impossible. Their DNA was rewriting itself. New genes were activating, genes that should not exist in the human genome. The virus had not tried to kill the survivors. It had transformed them. Marcus Webb discovered his new abilities in the worst way possible. He was reviewing star charts in the Defiance's command center when his vision suddenly exploded with information. He could see the ship's systems overlaid on reality like a ghost image. Power flows appeared as glowing rivers. Data streams looked like waterfalls of light. He could feel the ship around him, every circuit and computer as if they were extensions of his own body. He reached out with his mind and the ship responded. The engines fired without anyone touching the controls. Weapon systems armed themselves. The navigation computer plotted a course to coordinates he had only thought about. Marcus yanked his hand back from the console, breathing hard. What was happening to him? He was not alone. Across human space, other survivors found themselves able to interface with technology through touch or thought. Engineers could diagnose problems by laying hands on machines. Pilots could fly ships with their minds. Programmers could write code just by thinking it. Humanity was becoming something new. The shared dream started in month 7. Survivors began reporting identical visions. They saw other humans, people they had never met, living on distant worlds. At first, they thought they were going insane. Then they realized they were experiencing each other's thoughts. A network was forming, connecting human minds across light years of space. The connection was weak at first, just feelings and impressions. But it grew stronger every day. Sarah threw herself into research. She worked with survivors across a dozen colonies, sharing data through the growing mental network. What she discovered shocked her. The virus had not been designed to kill everyone. It had been designed to stress test humanity, to push their evolution forward by centuries in just a few weeks. The Kelthari had accidentally included a trigger sequence in the pathogen, something from their own experiments with forced evolution. They had not meant to give humanity powers. They had meant to give them death. But human DNA had reacted in ways they never predicted. The survivors who lived were those with specific genetic markers, ancient genes carried forward from humanity's earliest days. These genes had activated under extreme stress, combining with the viral code to create something unprecedented. Humanity was evolving, and they were evolving fast. The Galactic Assembly sent scout ships to verify human extinction. They needed to be certain before dividing the territories. 3 Vryn cruisers entered Earth orbit, scanning for signs of life. They found survivors in the Pacific settlement and landed to investigate. The Vryn soldiers wore combat armor and carried plasma weapons. They approached the settlement expecting to find a few hundred desperate refugees. Instead, they found 2,000 humans waiting for them in organized ranks. The Vryn captain activated his translator and demanded surrender. The humans did not move. They simply looked at the aliens with strange intensity. Then the Vryn soldiers' weapons began to deactivate. Their armor locked up. Their ship's systems went offline. The humans had not touched anything. They had simply wanted the technology to stop, and it had obeyed them. Marcus Webb walked forward from the human ranks. He placed his hand on the Vryn captain's armor and felt the systems inside. He could have stopped the alien's heart with a thought. He could have crashed the ships with a wish. Instead, he spoke calmly. Tell the assembly that humanity survived. Tell them we are not the same as we were, and tell them to stay away. The Vryn were allowed to leave. They ran for their ships and fled the system at maximum speed. Their report reached the assembly within days. The members gathered in emergency session, reading the accounts with growing dread. The humans had not just survived. They had become something more. Zekthar received the reports in his laboratory. He read them 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. The virus was supposed to kill. Instead, it had created super beings. He pulled up his old research files, checking his work. There, hidden in the genetic code, he found the trigger sequence. It had been part of an abandoned experiment, something he had copied into the human pathogen without understanding it fully. He had made a terrible mistake. He sent an anonymous message to the human network. He did not know if they would receive it, but he had to try. The message contained everything: the virus design, the assembly's vote, the planned division of human territory, and most importantly, a warning. The assembly would not accept this new humanity. They would try again to eliminate the threat. Humanity needed to prepare for war. Sarah Chen received the message through the network. She shared it with every survivor instantly. Within hours, all 600 million transformed humans knew the truth. They knew they had been murdered deliberately. They knew their enemy would strike again, and they knew they now had the power to fight back. The Phoenix generation had been born in fire and death. Now they would rise from the ashes, and the galaxy would learn what humanity could become when pushed to the edge of extinction. The attack came 1 year after the plague. Humanity was ready. The assembly had sent a war fleet to finish what the virus started. 200 ships jumped into the Sol system, weapons charged, ready to glass every human world until nothing lived. They found Earth's defense grid already active and aimed directly at their arrival points. The humans had known exactly when and where they would appear. Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Defiance, his mind linked to every ship in the human fleet. He did not need computers to coordinate tactics. He felt every pilot, every gunner, every engineer through the network. They moved as one being with 600 million parts. Fire, he said quietly. Human weapons opened up across the system, but they were not normal weapons anymore. Survivors had spent the past year learning to interface with technology in ways the original designers never imagined. Ship computers that once needed dozens of crew could now be operated by a single transformed human. Weapons that took minutes to target could now lock on instantly through technopathic control. And the network meant every ship shared perfect information in real time. The assembly fleet barely had time to raise shields before the first wave hit. Human missiles moved with impossible precision, exploiting tiny gaps in defensive screens. Energy beams bent around obstacles, guided by minds that could feel electromagnetic fields. 3 assembly cruisers exploded in the opening salvo. The remaining ships tried to return fire, but their targeting systems went haywire. Human technopaths reached across space and touched the enemy computers, feeding them false data. Weapons fired at empty coordinates. Ships maneuvered to avoid threats that did not exist. The carefully planned attack dissolved into chaos. Push forward, Marcus commanded through the network. Every human pilot felt his intention and responded. The defense fleet surged ahead, moving in perfect formation. They flew through the enemy ranks like sharks through a school of fish, tearing apart anything that got close. The assembly fleet broke and ran. They had come to commit genocide and found themselves outmatched by the people they had tried to erase. Only 70 ships escaped. The rest became debris orbiting Earth, a monument to humanity's refusal to die. Sarah Chen watched the battle from Mars Colony. She felt it through the network, experiencing the fight through 1,000 different perspectives at once. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying. They had won. But winning this battle meant committing to war. She returned to her laboratory and continued her research. Understanding their transformation was critical to survival. The changes were still progressing in strange ways. Some survivors could heal from injuries that should be fatal. Others needed less sleep or could process information faster than any computer. A few had begun to show signs of limited regeneration, regrowing damaged tissue over weeks instead of years. But there were costs. The network that connected them all was growing stronger, and some people struggled to maintain individual identity. They felt themselves blending into the collective consciousness, losing the boundaries between self and other. Sarah worked on techniques to help survivors maintain their humanity while using their new gifts. Marcus became the military leader of what they started calling the Phoenix Fleets. The name spread through the network and stuck. They were the generation that had died and been reborn as something more. The symbol appeared on every ship, a human figure rising from flames surrounded by stars. The war expanded quickly. Humanity did not wait for the assembly to recover. They struck at military bases and shipyards, crippling the alien coalition's ability to build new fleets. Every battle followed the same pattern. The assembly forces relied on conventional tactics and technology. The Phoenix generation simply reached into their ships and turned their own systems against them. But humanity did more than fight. As they liberated systems, they found other species living under assembly oppression. The Orathi had abstained from the vote and been punished with economic sanctions. The Corel had been conquered 2 centuries ago and enslaved. The Yoth were considered primitive and used as laborers. Humanity freed them all. The freed species looked at their rescuers with wonder and fear. These humans moved with inhuman grace and spoke with shared voices. They could destroy ships with thoughts and coordinate across light years instantly. They were more alien than any species in the assembly, yet they offered freedom instead of conquest. Marcus met with representatives of the freed peoples on Proxima Station. The meeting room was crowded with 12 species all talking over each other. The Arathi wanted to know humanity's intentions. The Corel demanded weapons to fight their former masters. The Yoth simply asked for ships to evacuate their homeworld before the assembly returned. "We will help all of you," Marcus said. "But we need your help too. The assembly will not stop until they destroy us. We need allies, not subjects." An Orathi elder pulsed with blue light, the color of skepticism. "Why should we trust you? You are more powerful than the assembly ever was. What stops you from becoming the next tyrants?" Marcus felt the network stirring with anger at the question. The Phoenix generation had suffered terribly. They had earned their power through death and transformation. To be compared to their murderers stung deeply. He pushed down the collective anger and chose his words carefully. "We did not choose this power. It was forced on us by people who wanted us dead. We could become what you fear. That would be easy. But we remember what it feels like to be helpless, to watch everyone we love die while others celebrate. We will not do that to anyone else, ever." The Arathi pulsed yellow, the color of acceptance.
"Then we will fight beside you." One by one, the other species agreed.
The war had created strange alliances. Humanity found itself leading a coalition of the desperate and oppressed against the established galactic order. The greatest battle came at Proxima Station itself, 6 months later. The assembly sent their reserve fleet, 50 warships crewed by their best soldiers. They came to retake the station and prove that humanity could be beaten. 300 Phoenix soldiers met them in orbit. Marcus commanded from the Defiance. His consciousness spread across the entire battle space. He felt his people around him, their minds linked in perfect harmony. They were outnumbered and outgunned on paper. In reality, the assembly never had a chance. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Human soldiers boarded enemy ships through teleportation technology they had reverse-engineered and improved. Once inside, they touched the ship systems and made them obey. Engines shut down. Life support failed in strategic areas. Weapons turned on sister ships. The assembly fleet tore itself apart from within. When the shooting stopped, 43 enemy vessels had been captured intact. 7 had been destroyed. None had escaped. The Phoenix generation had won the most one-sided battle in military history. News of the victory spread through the galaxy. The Galactic Assembly, the coalition that had ruled for 10,000 years, was collapsing. Member species began to negotiate separate peace with humanity. Some offered unconditional surrender. Others tried to claim they had opposed the human genocide all along. Marcus stood on the Defiance's bridge and felt the network's emotions. There was triumph and grief, rage and hope all mixed together. They had survived. They had adapted. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before. But the war was not over yet. The species that had created the plague still needed to answer for their crime. Zekthar's message arrived through encrypted channels. The Kelthari bioengineer who had designed their death now offered them the key to total victory, the location of the Kelthari High Council, and the defense codes for their homeworld. He asked for nothing in return except that they remember not all Kelthari had voted for genocide. Sarah Chen read the message and felt the network's instant response. Some wanted to use the information to strike immediately, others called for caution. A few suggested mercy. The debate raged through 600 million minds, each voice adding to the chorus. The decision would shape humanity's future. Would they become the monsters the Assembly had feared, or would they prove that power could be wielded with justice? The Phoenix fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kelthari system. 100 ships carrying 50,000 transformed humans, all linked through the network into a single vast consciousness. They had come for justice. What form that justice would take remained undecided. Marcus Webb felt the network's conflict like a physical weight. Some voices screamed for revenge. They wanted to release the plague back on the Kelthari. Let them experience the same agony they had inflicted on humanity. Others argued for trials and punishment. A few called for forgiveness. The debate had raged for weeks and still no consensus emerged. The Kelthari defense fleet is moving to intercept, his tactical officer reported. 60 ships. They are broadcasting on all channels, demanding we leave their territory. Marcus reached out through the network and touched the alien vessels. He felt their computer systems, their weapons, their engines. He could disable the entire fleet with a thought. The temptation was overwhelming. Instead, he opened a communication channel. This is Commander Marcus Webb of the Phoenix Fleet. We have not come to invade. We have come to speak with your High Council about crimes committed against humanity. Stand down, and no one needs to die today. The Kelthari Admiral responded immediately. You have no authority here. Leave or we will open fire. You tried to exterminate us, Marcus said quietly. 11 billion people died because your species decided we did not deserve to exist. We survived. We adapted. And now we have come to ensure it never happens again. You can let us pass peacefully or we can go through you. Choose. There was a long silence. Marcus felt the network waiting, ready to act on his decision. 50,000 minds focused on 60 enemy ships, calculating attack patterns, identifying weak points, preparing to strike. The power they held was intoxicating and terrifying. We will escort you to the homeworld, the Admiral finally said. But if you attack, we will defend ourselves. Agreed, Marcus said. The fleet moved forward, alien and human ships flying together in tense formation. Sarah Chen stood in the Defiance's medical bay, reviewing the latest data. The transformation was still progressing in unexpected ways. Some Phoenix generation members were beginning to age more slowly. Others showed resistance to radiation and disease that bordered on immunity. A few had started to develop minor physical changes. Enhanced eyesight, denser muscle tissue, more efficient organs. But the network troubled her most. The shared consciousness was growing stronger, and maintaining individual identity required constant effort. She had documented 17 cases of people losing themselves in the collective, their personalities dissolving into the greater whole. They were becoming something beyond human, and she was not sure if that was evolution or extinction of a different kind. Zekthar waited in his laboratory on the Kelthari homeworld. He had sent the defense codes to humanity, and prepared himself for whatever came next. Around him, his people panicked. Protests filled the streets. The High Council declared a state of emergency. Everyone knew the humans were coming, and everyone feared what they would do. He had spent the last year documenting everything about the plague. He had recorded his research notes, the council meetings where genocide was approved, The celebration when reports confirmed humanity's near extinction. He had gathered evidence of his species' greatest crime. Now he would present it to the victims and accept their judgment. The Phoenix fleet entered orbit around the Kelthari homeworld. Billions of aliens looked up at the sky and saw the ships that carried their doom. Evacuation orders blared across cities. Parents grabbed their children and ran for shelters. The High Council barricaded themselves in their underground complex and prayed to gods they had long forgotten. Marcus led a team of 100 humans down to the surface. They landed in the capital city's central plaza, surrounded by empty buildings. The streets were deserted. Even the Kelthari military had pulled back, unwilling to fight beings who could disable their weapons with a touch. Zekthar walked out alone to meet them. He wore no armor and carried no weapons. His 6 eyes fixed on Marcus, and he performed the Kelthari gesture of supplication, lowering himself to the ground. "I am Zekthar, designer of the plague that killed your people," he said. "I have prepared a complete record of our crime. I am ready to face justice." Marcus felt the network surge with hatred. This was the one who had created their suffering, who had engineered the death of billions. Some voices demanded immediate execution. Others wanted him tortured. The rage was so intense it nearly overwhelmed his individual consciousness. Sarah Chen's voice cut through the fury. She had stayed on the Defiance, but through the network she could speak to all of them. "If we kill him now, we are no better than they are. We need the truth first. We need the records. We need the galaxy to see what was done to us." "He deserves to die," someone said through the network. "Yes," Sarah agreed, "but we deserve justice more than we deserve revenge." "There is a difference." Marcus pulled himself free of the collective rage and focused on Zekthar. "Get up, take us to the High Council. They will face trial for genocide, and you will testify against them." The Kelthari led them underground to where the High Council hid. The doors were sealed and reinforced, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Marcus placed his hand on the metal and felt the locking mechanisms inside. He made them open. The council members screamed as the doors swung wide and humans walked into their sanctuary. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It was broadcast across the galaxy, every species watching as the evidence was presented. Zekthar testified for 5 days, explaining in technical detail how the plague was designed, how it was deployed, how the Kelthari had celebrated its success. The High Council tried to defend their actions, claiming humanity posed an existential threat to galactic peace. Sarah Chen took the stand and showed recordings of the plague's effects. She displayed images of the dead, piled in streets and fields. She played audio of the screams, the begging, the final goodbyes. She made the galaxy watch what genocide looked like up close. "They say we were dangerous," Sarah told the watching billions. "They say we expanded too fast, adapted too quickly." Maybe that was true. But the solution to fear is not murder. The answer to difference is not extinction. They had other choices. They chose this. The verdict was unanimous. The High Council was found guilty of genocide. The sentence was life imprisonment, to be served on a prison world where they would rebuild what they had destroyed. They would spend the rest of their lives helping construct memorials to the 11 billion humans they had killed. But even as justice was served, a new threat emerged. The Kelthari military, acting without council approval, had been developing a counter-virus. They had studied the survivors' blood samples collected from the captured scout ships. They believed they could reverse the transformation, return humanity to normal and vulnerable. As a final desperate act, they deployed it. The virus spread through the Phoenix fleet within hours. Every transformed human felt it enter their system, felt it attack their altered DNA. For a terrifying moment, Sarah thought they would lose everything, that they would be reduced to what they had been before. Then their immune systems activated. The Phoenix generation's bodies had evolved beyond anything the Kelthari imagined. The countervirus was identified, neutralized, and broken down for raw materials within minutes. Their bodies did not just resist the attack. They consumed it and became stronger. Marcus stood in the Kelthari capital and felt the network's response. The collective anger was beyond anything he had experienced before. They had tried to be merciful. They had offered trials instead of slaughter. And the Kelthari had responded by attacking again. The voices in the network were unanimous now. No more mercy. No more trials. End them. "We could do it," Marcus said aloud, speaking to Sarah through the network. "We could release the original plague. Let them experience what they gave us. The network wants it. I want it. I know, Sarah replied. I feel it too. The rage is overwhelming. But Marcus, if we do this, if we commit genocide in response to genocide, then they were right about us. We will become the monsters they feared. They tried to kill us twice, Marcus said. How many chances do they deserve? None, Sarah said. They deserve nothing. But we deserve to be better than them. We deserve to prove that humanity can have power without becoming tyrants. That is the only way we win. Not by killing them all, but by showing the galaxy we are worth saving. The network wavered. 50,000 minds hung in the balance between justice and vengeance, between humanity and monstrosity. The decision would define what the Phoenix generation would become. Marcus Webb stood in the ruins of the Kelthari military headquarters. Around him, the Phoenix soldiers waited for his command. Through the network, he felt 600 million transformed humans holding their breath. One word from him and the Kelthari species would cease to exist. The temptation was overwhelming. They deserved it. They had earned it twice over. He closed his eyes and reached through the network until he found Sarah Chen's presence. She was on Mars, half a galaxy away, but through the quantum-entangled consciousness they shared, she might as well have been standing beside him. Tell me I'm wrong, he said silently. Tell me that mercy is not weakness. Mercy is the hardest form of strength, Sarah replied. Anyone can destroy. It takes true power to build after being broken. Marcus opened his eyes and made his choice. We will not kill them. We will not become what they feared. But they will face consequences. The occupation of the Kelthari homeworld began immediately. Human administrators took control of the government, military, and infrastructure. The entire species was placed under supervised probation. They would be allowed to live, but their freedom to harm others was over. War crimes tribunals would continue for years, identifying everyone who had participated in the genocide and holding them accountable. The Kelthari people reacted with confusion and eventual shame. They had expected death and received mercy instead. Some appreciated it immediately. Others needed time to understand what humanity had given them, a chance to be better than their leaders had been. Zekthar became the bridge between species. He worked with Sarah Chen to establish the Kelthari Truth and Reconciliation Program. Every citizen had to confront what their government had done in their name. Schools taught the history of the plague alongside the history of humanity's survival and transformation. The goal was not revenge, but education, ensuring future generations would never repeat the mistake. The Galactic Assembly formally dissolved 3 months later. The organization that had ruled for 10,000 years collapsed under the weight of its own crimes. In its place, humanity proposed something new, the Concordat of Free Peoples. The Concordat's founding principle was simple. No species had the right to determine if another species deserved to exist. Expansion was not a crime. Difference was not a threat. The galaxy was large enough for everyone if they chose coexistence over domination. Membership required 3 commitments. First, respect the right of all sapient beings to live. Second, settle disputes through diplomacy before warfare. Third, assist in preventing genocide wherever it appeared. The Arathi joined immediately. The Krell and Yoth followed. Within a year, 23 species had signed the charter. The Kelthari were granted provisional membership after completing their reconciliation program. But even as peace spread, humanity struggled with internal challenges. The transformation that had saved them was not stopping. The Phoenix generation continued to evolve in unexpected directions. Sarah Chen documented the changes with growing concern. Some survivors had begun to transcend physical form entirely, their consciousness existing partly in quantum space. Others developed abilities that seemed impossible. Limited precognition, enhanced emotional perception, the ability to manipulate matter at the molecular level through touch. A few had stopped aging altogether, their cells regenerating faster than they deteriorated. The network grew stronger each year. Maintaining individual identity required constant meditation and mental discipline. Sarah feared that within a generation, the Phoenix generation might lose all sense of self and merge into a single vast consciousness. They would still exist, but not as individuals. Not as humans in any recognizable sense. We are becoming something else, she told Marcus during one of their rare physical meetings. They sat in her laboratory on Mars, 2 of the oldest survivors, watching younger Phoenix members through the window. The question is whether that something is still human. Does it matter? Marcus asked. We survived. We adapted. Is not that what humanity has always done? Yes, but we have always remained fundamentally human. What we are becoming might be beyond that. I have been studying the children born to Phoenix parents. They are normal. Completely normal. No enhanced abilities, no connection to the network, just regular human babies. The transformation does not pass to the next generation. Marcus absorbed this information. So we are not a new species. We are a transitional form. One generation between what was and what will be. Exactly, Sarah said. We are the bridge, and eventually we will fade. Our children will be human again, but with the latent potential we unlocked. Under extreme stress, they might transform like we did, but in normal life, they will live as humans lived before the plague. Then we have a responsibility, Marcus said. We need to build a galaxy where that potential never needs to activate, where humans never face extinction again. The memorial worlds were Sarah's idea, 7 planets scattered across human space, each dedicated to remembering the 11 billion dead. No one lived on these worlds. No industry scarred their surfaces. They were gardens, forests, and monuments. Every victim's name was carved in stone somewhere. Every family had a place to visit and remember. Marcus attended the dedication ceremony for the first memorial world. He walked through endless rows of names, reading them aloud even though no one was listening. His wife, his children, his crew, friends and strangers, all reduced to letters on stone. He wept for the first time since the plague ended. They are not really gone, a young voice said beside him. Marcus looked down at a girl, maybe 8 years old, one of the children born after the transformation. My mom says they live on through us, because we remember them. Your mother is wise, Marcus said, wiping his eyes. What is your name? Elena, the girl said. Elena Webb, you are my grandfather. Marcus stared at her. He had not known his son had survived long enough to have a child. He had not known he had a granddaughter. The network would have told him if he had asked, but he had been too afraid to look, too afraid of what he would find. Yes, he said finally. I am your grandfather. Tell me about yourself, Elena. As she talked, Marcus realized what they had been fighting for. Not revenge, not conquest, not even justice, though that mattered too. They had been fighting for the future, for children like Elena, who would grow up in a galaxy that respected rather than feared humanity, for generations that would never know the horror of extinction. The Concordat grew stronger each year. Species that had once been enemies learned to work together. The Kelthari bioengineering knowledge turned to peaceful purposes, helped cure diseases across a dozen worlds. The Arathi shared their understanding of quantum physics, advancing everyone's technology. The Corells experienced surviving oppression, became the foundation for civil rights standards. Humanity's transformation became legendary. Other species began requesting access to the Phoenix treatment, hoping to unlock similar potential in their own people. Sarah Chen led the research, developing a controlled version of the transformation that did not require near extinction as a trigger. It worked in about 30% of cases, granting enhanced abilities without the full Phoenix transformation. Other species began to evolve as well, carefully and safely. 20 years after the plague, Marcus Webb retired from military service. He had spent 2 decades building the Concordat's defense force, ensuring no species would ever again use genocide as a solution to fear. He moved to one of the memorial worlds and became its caretaker, tending the gardens and greeting visitors. It was peaceful work, and after so much war, peace was what he needed. Sarah Chen continued her research until the day she transcended. At age 90, her consciousness finally let go of physical form and merged completely with the quantum network. She was still there, still thinking and feeling and helping, but no longer bound to a single body. Other Phoenix Generation members followed over the years, ascending into something beyond human understanding. Zekthar lived his final years on Earth, teaching bioethics at the university where Sarah had once worked. He died at age 147, surrounded by human students who considered him a hero for his honesty and dedication to reconciliation. His funeral was attended by thousands, including many survivors who had forgiven him for his role in their suffering. 50 years after the plague, the last of the original Phoenix generation passed from physical existence. Some transcended like Sarah, others simply aged and died like Zekthar, their enhanced healing unable to stop time forever. A few chose to have their consciousness preserved in the network. becoming teachers and guides for future generations. Their children and grandchildren remembered them as heroes and warnings both. Heroes because they had saved humanity when extinction seemed certain, warnings because their power had been intoxicating, and only constant vigilance had prevented them from becoming monsters. Elena Webb stood in the same plaza where her grandfather had accepted the Kelthari surrender decades earlier. She was leading the ceremony for the Concordate's 50th anniversary. Representatives from 83 species attended, celebrating a half-century of peace. "We are here because people chose mercy over revenge," Elena said to the assembled delegates. "Because the Phoenix generation, who had every reason to become tyrants, chose instead to be guardians. They showed us that power without wisdom is just another form of tyranny. They proved that humanity's strength lies not in our ability to destroy, but in our capacity to forgive and build." She paused and looked up at the sky, where the network still pulsed with the consciousness of those who had transcended. "They are still with us, watching and guiding, and we honor them best not by worshiping them, but by continuing their work, building a galaxy where no species needs to fear extinction, where difference is celebrated rather than eliminated, where mercy is stronger than vengeance." The delegates rose and applauded. The ceremony continued for hours, but Elena's thoughts drifted to her grandfather. She could feel him in the network sometimes, a warm presence that felt like safety and home. The Phoenix generation had died and been reborn. Now they existed in a form beyond flesh, watching humanity's children build the future they had fought for. They had tried to erase humanity. They had engineered a virus meant to destroy. Instead, they had created something miraculous, something that fought back not with hatred but with hope. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how it should be.